Welcome to KBS World Radio. You're now tuned in to Korea 24's Korea Book Club, where we explore the world of Korean literature. This is our weekend replay edition, playing back our book segment from Wednesday's show. We hope you enjoy it. I'm your host, Kwon Jang-woo. Joining me in the studio now is our trusted literary critic, Barry Welsh. Barry, hello, it's good to see you.
Yes, hello, it's great to be back.
Okay, so what book are you introducing to our listeners today?
So we are reviewing a short story called A Future as Ordinary as This. The Korean title is 이토록 평범한 미래, and it's by Kim Yeonsu. It's translated by Sean Lin Halbert, and it was published in the spring 2023 edition of the Korean Literature Now magazine. And Kim Yeonsu is the featured writer in the Korean Literature Now magazine, published, as regular listeners will know, by the Literature Translation Institute of Korea. So as well as today's story, there's also an article about Kim's career and an interview with Kim himself. And you can find all of these things and more on the Korean Literature Now website. And Kim debuted 3 decades ago, actually, and has been a prolific, acclaimed, best-selling author, all for those across those 3 decades. He's written novels, short story collections, essay collections, poetry, and he's also a very highly regarded translator of international fiction into Korean for Korean publication. And career highs include winning numerous awards, such as the Isang Award, the Hwang Sun-won Award, and you're just a very beloved and successful writer here in Korea. And today's story is the title story of a collection that was published in Korea last year. The title is A Future as Ordinary as This. The whole collection hasn't been translated into English, so it's just this story we have so far. But that collection was voted Book of the Year in a survey of 50 Korean authors last year. And the story that we're reviewing, it's an optimistic, an inspiring story, or at least I thought it was inspiring, about the nature of time and our complicated personal relationship with time.
So it actually hasn't been that long since we reviewed another of Kim's works here on Korea Book Club. We reviewed his short story, Happy New Year to Everyone, at the start of the year. And that story was also concerned with time passing and how it affects the way people communicate with one another. So how is Kim approaching the subject of time in today's story then?
So the story is narrated from the perspective of a now middle-aged man in the present day looking back at his younger self in the summer of 1999. At this time he was an undergraduate. He was in a relationship with a young woman called Jimin, and he writes that I would come to remember that summer as the summer a spirit answered my life's deepest questions, and is the summer that sparked a long and beautiful relationship with a girl. This girl is Jimin. Importantly, Jimin's mother wrote a controversial book called Ash and Dust. This isn't a real book, but in the story she wrote a book called Ash and Dust when she was younger, and this book was banned by the Park Chung-hee administration. Shortly after it was banned, Jimin's mother killed herself in sort of disappointment and frustration, and her daughter Jimin has never been able to find a copy of this book to read because it was banned and it was difficult to get hold of. So Jimin and the narrator go to the narrator's bookworm uncle, who runs a second-hand bookstore, to see if he can help track it down. He doesn't have a copy of this book, but he can remember the basic story, and he tells the story to nephew and Jimin. Skip ahead 20 years to 2019. The narrator is working as a journalist when he comes across someone else who's been influenced by this difficult to obtain book, Ash and Dust. And this person was a successful investment banker who quit the banking industry and sort of went to the mountain and became a recluse to gain enlightenment. And this former banker is also, an avid fan of this book. And so does this book that was banned during the Park Chung-hee administration, does this book have the ability to teach people the meaning of life?
Okay, so there's this mysterious book then at the center of this story, a banned book that might hold the meaning of life. Do we get to know what's in the book exactly then? What story is contained in the book, and what insights does it offer about enlightenment and living well, I guess?
Right, okay, so it's quite complicated. So there's actually two important stories contained within the story. So one of the stories is the plot of the book, Ash and Dust, and then there's also the life story of the investment banker turned the sort of enlightenment seeker. And both of these stories are told to the reader. So the plot of Ash and Dust, it's about two young lovers who, like in the story Benjamin Button by F. Scott Fitzgerald, there was a movie adaptation of that as well. They start to live their lives in reverse, right? So one day, they realize their romance is over. They're at the end of their relationship, and they're in despair. But then something happens, and the next day they start going backward through time, and it's as if they're sort of going back and reliving the romantic highs of their relationship, getting more sort of idealistic and in love as they get closer to the point where they first met each other. And so there's a quote that sums it up a little bit. They couldn't believe it. They had been so surprised, thrilled and excited to meet. As soon as they realised this, the two of them looked at each other as though they were meeting for the first time all over again. And then time started to flow in its original direction, and then their third life began. And this is the story, of this sort of time going backwards and then going forward again. This story that inspires this, former investment banker Kim Won to change his life. Why does this make him change his life? So throughout his life, he's loved gambling, but he's, even though he thought he had this great system for gambling, he often lost. And one day he loses everything. And when he reads this book, he realizes that the past doesn't determine the present. The future determines the present. And this ultimately leads to him changing his life.
So what is the reader to make of all this philosophizing, should I say, and how successful do you think it is? Right,
so this is a fascinating story, and you can see why all of those other writers, voted this story in the collection it's from for the Book of the Year last year. It's a textured story, and it's layered, and it's full of this sort of, Buddhist-inspired wisdom, and it's framed very beautifully by these two different stories. There's something that I think will resonate with a lot of people in these stories. There's many aspects that we haven't mentioned. It's only a short story, but there's many things that we haven't squeezed into the sort of the summary and review. I thought it was a story full of wisdom. There's a lot of things that we can learn and take from Kim Yeonsu's writing here. And, there were so many parts I wanted to quote, but I'll just quote this little section. So the former investment banker writes at one point, "People say life is a sea of hardship, but the essence of our existence is happiness. Life is in fact a sea of happiness, but waves emerge on the sea to hide its true appearance. Waves may originate from the sea, but they're not the sea itself, and they eventually hide its true nature."
Indeed, it sounds like a fascinating story that will really challenge readers. That's all for Korea Book Club today. Barry, thank you for your review. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.
Okay, take care.
And that's all for this week's Korea Book Club. You can check out more of the works we discussed on our website at world.kbs.co.kr. Join us again next week.
KBS World Radio